Hi, welcome to my talk about leveraging prompt engineering for effective OpenAPI descriptions of APIs. So a very long title actually. Just talking about what you can do by using prompt engineering to create effective OpenAPI descriptions, whatever that means actually. So we will have a look at it in, I think, nearly 30 minutes to go or 25 minutes to go. So really have a look at the stuff you would like to see. So my name is Kocot. I'm working for Codecentric in Germany, and I'm the head of API experience and operations. So we're doing a lot of consultancy work with our customers. And I'm also voluntary and async API ambassador. So I'm focusing on really bringing up this async API definition to another level and talking about it also when I'm not talking about OpenAPI stuff and other stuff actually. So going into the work, our daily work, actually, when we really think with customers about APIs, we really think about them, actually, to be honest. And we always talk about life cycles all the time. So we're really focusing on doing things automatically, programmatically. So we really want to spend not so much time in doing things in the field. Maybe at the beginning we start to think about, we have to do this, we have to do that, but then in the next step, really focus on automation in that field. So really our point of view is really to look at the stuff, thinking about that, and really think about how can we automate this stuff, or how can we bring maybe AI into the field actually to really think about stuff from a different direction and maybe focus on other things then and doing the groundwork with automation and AI in the context actually. So, and when we have life cycles like these, it's always about that we have a consumer need at first. So really somebody is looking for something, is doing discovery within the organization. Hopefully the organization has a portal, a marketplace or whatever to really make sure that consumers can discover things. And maybe the discovery is not successful, then we really have to understand the needs of the customers. We define requirements, then we go over to the design drafting the first design, have a review on that, then doing the implementation with some help, and move on with testing. But to be honest, testing is always starting with the first draft of an API, but for the normal purpose, it's easier to have this life cycle like having a separate test stage or something like that. And do the deployment of the API and the service, then having some kind of monitoring, seeing what is happening with the API, is it used or is it not used. And then maybe we have to think about of retirement, or we have to think about maintain the API to really make sure that it fits the consumer needs again and again. But this is a very complex one, so it's even condensed, but it's really a complex workflow, a complex life cycle. So let's just focus on specific steps. So really understanding the needs, bringing up the stuff, thinking about the first draft of the API, go into the review stage, think about implementation, and then really looking at the test side. So this is really something what we learned in the last month actually by talking with customers actually about the principles of bringing in something like AI by using ChatGPT, maybe using GitHub Copilot or other copilots that are available right now. So really thinking about what is actually possible and what is meant to be obtained or maintained by another party by using a specific kind of tool. So when we look at the needs, the API providers should be supported by enablement teams to really think about this design thinking methodologies to bring up APIs actually. And what you need to really understand the needs is to have personas available. A good thing actually, but also a very tricky one to be honest. And for these personas, you might need empathy maps. You might want to use to really sharpen the results, something like what, how, why actually to really make sure you have all the methodologies available that are implemented by using some kind of design thinking. And maybe you bring up somehow ChatGPT into that context. Definitely in the end, where you really summarize stuff. So when we go further by just looking at prompting, it's getting interesting. So normally it's quite hard to talk about personas, so you really have to focus on it. But when you're working with more technical guys, it's really hard to make them think in personas. So maybe it's a good start to just ask ChatGPT for a persona in that context, saying, okay, we want to create a developer persona with the main technical skills of Java and OpenAPI. That's actually quite easy. You just have to put in a prompt and say, okay, that's what we need. And you see on the right side actually a result. So this is something we can rely on. In the normal concept, you really would focus with somebody who's sufficient in this to really create personas all the way. But what we do now for this talk is to really use ChatGPT for that. Actually, when you go further, having these somehow created persona and move on looking at to create an empathy map. Yeah, what is he really thinking? What feels the person? What is the person saying? In that context, it's actually quite hard to create some empathy map, but I did it already with using just ChatGPT by just using the persona up front to really make sure that it's possible for prompting when you have all the information available to really create an empathy map and not to spend time on it and creating something. It's actually not a good description because when you use something like diagrams in the context of ChatGPT, is always using Mermit, and Mermit is not so far in really presenting ideas of design thinking principles and methodologies actually. So it's something you just have to put on the leverage and say, okay, this is what ChatGPT put out of the all written in persona description and then creates actually an empathy map. But even in that case, ChatGPT could be helpful if you would create in a plugin or something like that to really create this empathy map we know from the books in regards of design thinking and so on. So it's really about something to make it shouldn't be visible, but it could be made visible actually so far. And we can move further thinking about the what, how, why mythology actually. And we again use the persona of Alex Morgan, who has been created by ChatGPT so far. So really thinking about the what, the how, and the why. And it creates actually another mind map for us to really make sure that we have this persona available. So if you have created a persona on your own, you could even with prompting bring it up to other visualization, because this is something which normally takes time. In that case, you just put in the data saying, okay, this is what we already have, and make it visualized in another way and to make things more obvious for others to read about this persona actually. And we can move further and thinking about how we can do something like a customer journey map. Yeah, what is the persona really thinking of, and what are the considerations, what decisions to take, and actually what actions, what advocacy, and really make sure that we are always on this nearly customer journey or consumer journey, so that we really think more in the way the customer is thinking, not really saying, it's a consumer. Because even in the context of an API, it's even more complex, because we just focused on the directly involved consumer. But we also have in this context users available, which could be more complicated even to follow actually. So we have the possibilities there with some prompting to make more informations available about these specific users of applications that are using APIs actually. That's really one good perspective to really move on, to really play with the information available, not really create information on your own. We did just for the example here to have a persona available, but really to think about to collect data about users of applications, to create personas in regards of users of applications that are using APIs, and also really think about who is using these APIs to create new applications. To really make sure that you have all the information gathered in one place. So we are in a large language model actually again, covering all the data sets, and then make it possible for others to create this subset informations actually, to really bring up informations from the already available informations and regather them and make them more compromised or another way visualized or anything like that, to really make sure everybody understands the need of the specific personas using APIs in their context actually. And that's a really thing to move forward, not to really think about, I have to interview this person, I have to interview this person again and again and again. In this context of an enterprise, it's quite hard actually to gather all the informations, but to really make sure that you're collecting informations all over and all over again. Actually, it's really good to make this available for prompting. To get informations more consistent, actually, it's quite important then, but to really make sure that others can use these informations. So now we know who might be using the APIs we creating. And when we think further in this life cycle, actually, we have to think about, we have to build a first draft. So we really should think about what are the consumers needing, and we should write down this into a description. Normally the people now, because they learned they have to design first APIs, they're always going on with using stuff like OpenAPI, but that might not be a good choice actually. It might be better, but we do it here with OpenAPI, not to make it more complicated, but to really think about it. It might be better to have a DSL available, so domain-specific language, so that we really can think more in a language that is more accomplished to our situation where we are in, so maybe more natural language-based, having specific paradox and concepts actually of programming language, to make sure that it's easy for our trained large language model in the end to fully support the process. Because having an OpenAPI description, we will see this further actually, it's not that easy. So really think about the steps to take actually. It's not so natural talking about in an OpenAPI description, but really think about what is to take to really make it more domain specific, so more organization specific, so that we have a specific language for the organization available. But when we look at the things we could do with prompting actually, we could use Copilot for Visual Studio for that, or Visual Studio Code actually. And we can describe an API by using the chat or as a comment in the code actually, saying something like, create a new product OpenAPI definition using problem plus JSON for errors and help plus JSON for the data. Oh, very technical. Everybody would say. So it's not the kind of thing you would expect actually when you are thinking about you have business people available. So this so-called citizen developers by literature actually, and there are really a lot of people in enterprise companies who are citizen developers. They can't get a thing out of this because they might understand that we need a definition of a new product API actually, that's the point. But then using problem plus JSON for errors and help plus JSON for data, they're lost. And then if you would create something in the chat or in the comment in the code actually, in a file, it will create an API description out of the blue. So with maybe no context really, when you just use Copilot, as it is open to all available actually, so that you will not get the right data set actually. So it's really something you need to explain then by others actually that are more technical, to really make sure that there is the right data at the right time. And this is really something that is quite difficult. So in the end, when we are working in enterprise context, you need this fully closed Copilot type of thing, that you really are able to create large language models of existence, API definitions on your own, because you really want that there is something created that's always relying on standards and so on, because you have processes underneath that really need to be maintained by using some kind of specific governance methods or anything like that, so that you're really aware that this OpenAPI definition is right. That's why I was talking about this specific domain-specific language, actually having something like Microsoft TypeSpec available, where you're focusing coming from the data model just to create interfaces based on that data model, not really bringing up something, oh yeah, I will do an OpenAPI definition. No, don't talk about that. Just say, oh yeah, we will create interfaces, because this is more programmatically. At the moment, this is not working actually with Copilot quite well, because Copilot isn't understanding directly what you want to achieve, because Copilot isn't knowing anything about Microsoft TypeSpec so far. So it's bringing up TypeScript things. So it's not something you will achieve by just having Copilot running somewhere. You really need to think about to create large language models based on something like the Microsoft TypeSpec specification, which is growing in the background actually by getting new versions every month available. So there is a lot of movement actually in that field, but it will help us to create in the end good API definitions for people coming more from the business side, so that they don't have to think about the problem plus JSON, the help plus JSON stuff of representation. They just can create and can come up and create something like a new product API, a new order API, or something like that, what you actually need. And then Copilot is bringing up the power actually towards the stuff and saying, oh yeah, you're just a business user. You don't have any ideas about what is has technical to be done. I just create this interface and I just put up a specific data model backed by data products and data contracts actually to really obtain the things. But this is a lot to do in the backend actually, to really make sure that the large language model is available for so many people actually, to bring up the value for the whole organization in that case. So when we have created this first draft, let's call it actually draft. So we get this definition back. We get into a first step of review actually. So we really have to review things. There was some kind of an idea from the API handyman on the internet. So it's on his blog actually, to be honest, and it was to record the results of a validation as a basis of possible review in an Excel sheet actually, in an Excel table. And it's really something to think about and think about it more deeply. It's really not really something you would like to do automatically or anything like that. So you really have to think about, what do we have to think about? So we have to draw conclusions and how we would like to have API designs within the organization. So and then we have evaluations. We are just collecting data and seeing what is happening actually by just charging rule sets or something like that to really come up, to really back the quality of the design of an API and really make sure that people understand what we are doing in a black box. So nobody needs to have a real idea what we are testing or what we are having rule sets for actually to obtain an API to be good for the organization, good designed actually for the organization. And that's one of the key things to really think about. So when we go further in prompting the stuff, it would be good, and it's actually possible, but it has to be adapted actually for the organization. But in the end, we are able to review API definitions already with ChatGPT, saying, okay, go through it and think about it, but be careful then, because you receive a protocol of general observations, endpoint-specific observations, and recommendations. But be careful with them, because they're not totally relying 100% in regards of the large language model of your organization so far, when you just are using the basic set by OpenAI or somebody else who's bringing up the stuff. So it's not related to your own. So you really have to maintain a large language model with inside the organization to really have these possibilities available. So saying that something about the OpenAPI version. So in that case, using 3.00 is good. Yeah, it's widely adopted. Maybe you should use, but this is something maybe obtained in the organization. Use something like 3.03 to be more on a higher adopted version or something like that. Yeah, that you need an info block. So that are the basics actually. So talking about content types, you have to choose HEL plus JSON for data, problem plus JSON for errors. That's a good choice, especially saying that by aiming for hypermedia-driven APIs and standard error handling or something like that. And you then can go really further, saying, okay, go deeply into the methods and make sure that there is something available, because in the end, we want to implement a service in regards of the API. So really, because we're starting with the design of an API, we choose that way actually. When you would think about starting by code first, which is also a good way to start, it really depends on your organization so far. Not to start by design first, thinking about code first in that context. It would be actually the same. You would create an API programmatically, not creating this OpenAPI description. It would be actually the same. So you need in all the cases this large language model to really have a good value for the organization as a whole in the end. So really thinking about, is it worth to do the review steps by asking some kind of large language model, is this a good API definition in the context of the organization? But this, we see that here actually can really help us. Not to have somebody there available thinking about, oh yeah, I have to look at the API because it's the review step. It's actually part of the pipeline then, to really automate the things and give feedback. And then you maybe have some things, if the AI is saying, oh yeah, that's not actually a good definition, we see their blockers, that you just stop the process then. So it's actually a good thing, a good way to go, and to really obtain a good API in that case. So, and we are now actually moving from this first draft review to the implementation of the API. So we really think about, oh yeah, we need a portal or marketplace, or have a portal or marketplace, and really bring up this API with a backend available to really suit the use cases based on the description and so far. So, and we could think about having an AI really talking about how can I do the implementation so far? Because sometimes developers might be not sufficient in the technologies used in the company, so they need some kind of guidance. And that's the way to really bring up then Copilot into the process, saying, okay, what is needed actually? So we do some prompting there, and we just chat with Copilot within the Visual Studio Code actually, saying, okay, we want to create a Spring Boot backend for our project. So we have this API available, and they're saying, oh, please use OpenAPI generator and generate the whole backend. To be honest, coming from a development side, actually, that's not the best approach, but it's a good starting point. So maybe you need then another large language model getting the information back how your organization is creating services based on an open API. It's actually the same by just starting with code first. Actually, really bring up the stuff you want to have there and bring up all the data saying this is what you need, and make sure that the AI is able to really bring up the stuff and make people productive in the end, because this is what we want. We want to have productive developers. And how they achieve it, it really depends on the organization. So if the organization is lean into having something like having a chatbot available and saying, okay, these are the steps to go because we are covering our organization documentation data and this is the way to go, and you don't have to search for tutorials or something like that, that's a really good place to go. So it's all about really gathering the data and put it onto a large language model and really let the people play with the large language model. For testing, it's actually the same. We can use AI there to really test an API, to really test the service, actually to create in the end test cases, because it's always the same what we are doing out there. So we think about stuff, we really move things up, and we create test cases all the time and bring up stuff actually, and sometimes we repeat things. So a good way to really bring in something and say, dear ChatGPT, create test cases for this API definition I provide to you. And there we have test cases. Even, and that's a good thing, also negative ones. So we don't only test the happy path. In that case, there is something coming up saying, oh yeah, you could also think about testing the negative or the unhappy path, actually, to really bring up value again, to make sure that things are also not working if there is something negative actually happening so far. And the good thing is, so we create test cases. Maybe you use something like Gherkin. Yeah, let's create specifications in Gherkin. So we just say, okay, create Gherkin specifications from the test cases above. And it's all written down, so we can put on the things saying, okay, this is the API. We have created test cases. We can document the test cases. We can then go over, moving up further, saying, okay, we have Gherkin specifications available for the test cases. So we just need somebody to write the real tests for the APIs that are available. And the more you really think about this, you really can underline the process you saw earlier, actually. So you really can think about what are the possibilities. And in the future, to be honest, there will be even more. You can use other testing frameworks, maybe something like Playwright, which is coming right up, but because a lot of people are using it, to really make sure that, again, developer productivity rises, and it has to rise to really bring up good software. And the more help we give to the developers, actually, the more they have time to focus on the real things meant to be for creating good software, actually. So it's really up to us all here at this conference to really show what is possible, what are the possibilities to really bring a lot of value to organizations, to really rise up the things and be there and just shine. Not just talking about tools and other stuff, really bring up existing things like life cycles and so on, what is needed to really obtain them for a better future in regards of developer productivity. And in the end, about success, because this is what we want to have with our customers at Codecentric, actually. We want to have successful projects with successful customers. And this is what you really need in the case of really leveraging prompt engineering to another dimension. So that was my talk about all the things in regards of prompt engineering and OpenAPI stuff. So I hope you enjoyed what I really talked about, and have some other time at the conference and maybe see you in the real world. Goodbye.